What shall I do? Okay, welcome everybody. I forgot to press go live, so now I'm going to repeat my talk and bore the people who are in the room. And I'm apologize for being late. I I don't know if I'll be able to do this talk in an hour, but I'll see if I can. So, okay, so my bad for not starting the stream. Okay, so here we are in the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, which is especially useful for showing the ways to work with the feelings associated with the renunciation and feelings associated with the householder life. As the setup for this basic central teaching, the Buddha teaches about the 6 sense fields. The 6 classes of consciousness, 6 classes of contact, and 18 mental preoccupations. And then when it comes to what's called 36 positions of sentient beings, this is the 36 is the main teaching that I want to focus on tonight. So the 6 sense fields, the interior sense fields, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, should be understood. These are part of dukkha. These interior sense fields are capable of experiencing corresponding external sense fields, the sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. And that capacity for knowing and experiencing them is called the 6 classes of consciousness. When those 3 things come together, the inner sense space, the external sense space, and the consciousness, then you have what's called contact, and you have 6 kinds of contact. This teaching, the 18 mental preoccupations, this teaching appears in 2 places. It appears in this sutta, 137 in the Middle Length Discourses, Salayatana Vibhanga, and it also occurs in number 140, which is the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta. And in this sutta, it's basically presenting them as you'll see as this develops, it's kind of a progressive teaching about how to refine and purify one's experience with these phenomena, these mental preoccupations. And in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, this is a setup for how the Arahant is able to go beyond the mental preoccupations in full enlightenment. The word manopa vichara is mana, which is mind, upa, which means unto, and vichara, which means sustained thought. And this is a particular term that's referring to the way that the mind connects and attaches, focuses, and explores objects which have been experienced in terms of one of the 3 kinds of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So seeing a sight with the eye, one is preoccupied with a sight. That's a basis for happiness, sadness, or equanimity. This upavichara or manopavichara is neutral when it's applied with wisdom. It can be a wholesome mental factor. So I think you should not think that this manopavichara is automatically unskillful, dangerous, and part of dukkha. You are able to bring it together with wisdom, but it's also very common, like this preoccupation, this exploration that could become an obsession. So when the mind is unskillful, that would be the natural progression. One goes to liking and disliking, which is an aspect of greed and aversion, and one then pursues that kind of appropriation of the experience, that proliferation of opinions and views that lead to unwholesome states and unskillful actions. Now, here we come to the 36 positions of sentient beings. The Buddha says there are 6 kinds of domestic happiness and 6 kinds of renunciate happiness, 6 kinds of domestic sadness, 6 kinds of renunciate sadness, 6 kinds of domestic equanimity, 6 kinds of renunciate equanimity. Domestic in Pali is Gehasitani, so that's referring to a householder. This comes back to sort of an opinion of mine that I don't hear many other people saying, and that is when you talk about worldly pleasure or sensual greed, the world that we live in is called a kama loka. So we live in the world of sensual desire. Kama is sensual desire. People think of kama as primarily being like falling in love, sexual attraction, the sensual enjoyment of food and luxuries and so forth like that. But I've seen that the kama loka also includes the acquisition, I'll say materialistic pleasure. So if you said someone is a materialist, it doesn't just mean that they fall in love and have sex. It also means that they like to get stuff. They like to build a good house. They like to have a good car. They like to have a good job. They like to have a lot of money in the bank. And they like to have employees or people who are working for them. They like their families, like their spouse and their children, to love and admire them. They want to have a good reputation, and so on like that. So those aspects of what's called here domestic happiness is also part of this kama tanha, this sensual craving includes that. So there are sights known by the eye which are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasing, connected with worldly pleasures of the flesh. Happiness arises when you regard it as a gain. To obtain such sights, or when you recollect sights that you formerly obtained. that have passed, ceased, and perished. So you can happily have all those acquisitions that you've identified with that are, you feel that you need to have them for your happiness. And you can also remember the things that you had in the past. So experiences that you had, the vacation you took last year, the beautiful, healthy body that you had when you were younger. You can remember those things with happiness. You can reminisce about those things. So that's the whole solar happiness, domestic happiness. And that's the same thing with the sixth sense basis. Then you have the 6 kinds of renunciate happiness. And that is when you've understood the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation. Happiness arises as you truly understand, through right understanding, that both formerly and now, all those sights are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. So the car, the family, the job, the house, the wealth, and the reputation, all of those things, you may come to see the dukkha in all of those acquisitions, seeing how much work it takes to acquire them, how much work it takes to maintain them, how much anxiety and fear there is that they might be lost, and how much the happiness that comes from those things is actually rather puny and inconsequential, short-lived, doesn't really amount to very much, because it's not permanent, not reliable, not trustworthy. Any disaster can come by and wipe it all away on an instant, and will do so. But when you understand impermanence, and you know that all those acquisitions are going to perish and fade away and disappear, then you no longer need to be concerned about the incoming disasters that are going to make those things go. You no longer have to be concerned about exerting effort to hold on to those possessions. And especially you won't have to try to keep up the delusion that those possessions are permanent. Keeping up a delusion is very painful. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort, and super anxiety provoking. So when you see the fading and disappearing, then you can say, it's gone. My teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, tells a story about one of his students who had a bad relationship with her boyfriend, and they got into a quarrel and broke up, and she told him that she was throwing him out of the apartment, and then she left and took a retreat at the Insight Meditation Society, and so she had a long retreat at the IMS, and at the end of the retreat, she went back home and discovered that her boyfriend had removed all the furniture from the house. And so from the apartment was completely empty. But because of having been on retreat, she just felt so happy and joyful and said, "Oh, yes, it's all gone. It's all gone." So that's impermanence. That's the joy of impermanence, a renunciate happiness. And so the same thing with all the 6 phases. Then there's the domestic sadness. These are the same likable, desirable, agreeable things. And then if you regard it as a loss to lose such sights, or you recollect the sights you formerly lost that have passed, ceased, and perished. And if you are stuck in grief with the things that have been lost, or with anxiety about the things that might be lost in the future, that's the domestic sadness. and that then the renunciate sadness. So when you have got the wisdom, the realization about the impermanence of all of those things which perish and fade away, then it says, upon seeing this, you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberations. Oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? And so that desire for noble liberation is described as a renunciate sadness. So this is spiritual urgency, and I should say this is a very useful teaching and somewhat unique. That's a good correction. Sometimes people think that longing or desire is unskillful, and that the desire for liberation is also unskillful, and that one should not have any desire for liberation. But in this teaching, as you'll see, it's developed. It says that the desire for liberation is a valid and useful part of the path. It is given up at the end, but along the path, having that spiritual urgency, having the desire for spiritual success is part of renunciation. So then we have the domestic equanimity, householder's equanimity, and this is referring to a person who doesn't develop much insight, doesn't have insight, and they simply go through life experiencing the sights and the other experiences with this, through their senses, and they don't overcome the limitations. They don't see the limitation and the danger with respect to these objects. So that is, if you have something nice and if you become attached to that thing, then you've got the danger that when you lose it later on, there will be grief. And even while you're attached to something, there's the anxiety associated with that, which is also painful. So the pleasure and pain are mixed together with that precious, desirable object. But a person who doesn't think very much, they just enjoy pleasure, and when they lose it, they don't get the anxiety of having a pleasant object because they're not looking ahead to see the danger of loss in connection with that object. So this is a kind of a dullness, a mental dullness of just not seeing. And likewise with all the senses. Then the renunciate equanimity. This is something that's to be cultivated. You see the impermanence of sights, their perishing, fading away, and cessation. You see again and again. This is the object that in this particular sutta, all of the different objects are to be examined in terms of perishing, fading away, and cessation. And then all three of the renunciate feelings can arise in turn within that contemplation. So when you understand that both formerly and now, all those sides are impermanent, suffering, and perishable, then equanimity can arise. So this is the immovable calmness, which is not disturbed by elation of pleasant things, nor is it disturbed by loss. Not disturbed by pleasant feeling, not disturbed by unpleasant feeling. And yet, this equanimity is filled with insight, and it is able to clearly see and notice all of the experiences that are coming up through the senses. So now that comes this teaching of this path. Relying on this, give up that. So to go beyond that domestic happiness, you remember what that is about enjoying your car and your stuff. Rely on the renunciate happiness, seeing the impermanence. So with that reflection, you will be able to get beyond the householder happiness. Then the domestic sadness, you give it up by reflecting on renunciate sadness. So when you experience the loss or grief and sorrow, lamentation about the dukkha in this life from the loss of those desirable things, if you will convert that to the desire for liberation, you can transform and transcend grief by turning towards the desire for liberation and the motivation for that, the spiritual urgency for liberation. And then following the pattern, the renunciate, with renunciate equanimity, you give up domestic equanimity. This also reminds me of, there's a bit of a pun or a little meaning within equanimity. Upekkha has got the root meaning ekka, which has got the idea of seeing. So what equanimity does is it calmly overlooks and sees all of the experiences. So upekkha is this even-minded seeing that gives like equal attention to every moment that comes along. And whether it's a piece of cake or a giant rattlesnake or a friend or an enemy, equanimity sees all of them evenly. It's not distracted by, obsessed by one thing and unable to see anything else. And so this, what's called a householder equanimity is actually an equanimity that doesn't really see anything very clearly, and not seeing is overcome by seeing. Now it goes on. So now you've given up those three domestic sets, and you have the renunciate happiness, sadness, and equanimity. Then it says, by relying on the renunciate equanimity give up the renunciate happiness. In this case, the renunciant happiness can be associated with the happiness of the jhana, happiness of meditation, when one is free from craving and aversion, and free from the hindrances, and that very strong blissful, joyful experience arises in meditation. The one little danger with that meditative happiness is if you became attached to it, you would lose the opportunity for wisdom to arise. And so the natural progression that's given in Samma Samadhi, in the four jhanas, is that happiness settles down and calms down and is let go. First, the strong bliss is let go, then the happiness is let go, then the somanasa, domanasa is let go, and until one is just dwelling in pure equanimity. And then it says here that there is equanimity that's diversified, based on diversity, and equanimity that's unified, based on unity. Equanimity based on diversity is equanimity towards sight, sound, smells, tastes, and touches. Equanimity based on unity is the equanimity based on the dimension of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. That is to say, on the immaterial meditation. Even if one is not a practitioner of the immaterial meditations, it's a very useful model or a pattern that's related to our final liberation to follow this. This is developed more thoroughly and clearly in the Chula Sunyata Sutta, when it talks about a meditator when they leave the village and go to the forest, or they go to the monastery, and they notice that the monastery is empty of all of the distractions of the village, and they leave the monastery and go to the forest, and they see the forest is empty of all the distractions of the monastery, and then while they're in the forest, they've got the perception of trees, and ignore or eliminate the perception of trees, and they just have a perception of forest, and then they eliminate the perception of forest, and they just have the perception of space. So the space for the trees is a meditative technique for having the mind not be attracted with those mental preoccupations like we had at the beginning. When you see something pleasant, the mind becomes preoccupied or you could say even obsessed, and is looking and exploring and involved in sort of moving around, investigating that phenomenon that's attracted the attention because of the feeling. So here, when you come to unity, it's like one has become, or the mind has become tired of running around, tired of the agitation, tired of the activity, and more attracted towards stillness and calmness, and then letting go of the mind running after the visible sights, the smells, the sounds, the touches, and the thoughts, and not wanting to explore the diversity of those inputs. And when those inputs drop out, then one could experience emptiness, or one notices the absence of those things, and just the presence of infinite space, and so on. But even that is not the goal of this practice. The last one. Oops. It says, relying on not being determined by that. Give up equanimity based on unity. So this is like the last scrap of identification of a self. So if you are, suppose that you've been able to step away from the contact of the senses and be experiencing infinite consciousness, or one of the other immaterial meditations, if there's that small fragment of identification, then you have the thought that, like, I am determined by that, and there's the creation of a self. And so then the final step is that there's no self which is determined by what's being experienced. And that's the final, in this case, is described as equanimity based on unity. So that's how that's given up. Okay, so now I'm, with apologies, I'm going to pause here. The last a little bit here is a demonstration of how the Buddha, who has achieved that final level of practice, being liberated based on unity, not determined by that. So he gives this teaching to the disciples out of kindness and sympathy. This is for your welfare. This is for your happiness. But the disciples don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. They go away and don't turn away from the teacher's instruction. But the realized one is not unhappy. He doesn't feel unhappiness. He remains unfestering, with no asavas, mindful and aware. And then another group of disciples do want to listen, and they do actually listen, and they try to understand. In that case, the Buddha is not unhappy. He's not happy. He's just equanimous. And then the third case is where some of them want to listen and some of them don't want to listen. And then the realized one is not unhappy, and then he's not happy and not unhappy. So he remains equanimous regardless of whether or not the students are listening to his teaching. I'm going to turn now to questions. A bhikkhunu who spent 20 vasas in the order of Chintana, that's not relevant to the sutta. It's Mahateri. The stream, I must apologize about the stream. Here's I feel anxiety at losing a desired object only if I feel there is something I can do about it. Does the Buddha distinguish between things that can be changed and those that can't? Well, the Buddha does, when he presents those dhammas which are true at all times, in all cases, regardless of whether or not the Tathagata exists or not, this dhamma is always true. All things are impermanent. All conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things are dukkha. All dhammas are without self. And so those are examples of things that cannot be changed. And by reflecting on those qualities, one can stabilize and settle the mind and gain equanimity towards objects. So this control is an aspect of the self-delusion. If you think that you can control the desired object, or that you should control the desired object, then you've got some delusion about it. So then when the Buddha asked the students, is your form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is it dukkha or sukha? It's dukkha. And so then he says that the form is impermanent. You can't control it. You can't stop the impermanence. So it's the kind of effort at control that tries to control things which are not self and which don't belong to the self, and which really truly cannot be controlled. Now, it's still true that one can make the right effort. But making the right effort is not the same as control. And so that control that has the aspect of ownership or identification, that's the one that creates the misery, because it's trying to create a permanent essence or a self out of that situation. So Manala is asking if spiritual urgency can be retained as a householder. And yes, so a person can be living in a house with money in the bank, with a spouse and children, in a job, and they can still give up their attachment to those worldly things. They're just keeping those worldly things out of a sense of compassion for the people that are benefited by the work that they do, and fulfilling the responsibilities that one may have towards those who are depending on one. So one can take care of the house, the children, the car, and the job without necessarily being attached to it or being caught up and swept away by these householder emotions. Instead, one can constantly have the reflection that even though we have all these things, they don't really belong to us. Really, it's impersonal, and they can be taken away at any moment. So develop that detachment and develop that renunciation towards one's life, even in the householder state. Here's a question regarding equanimity. Is this a mental state which we can fake it until we make it? With some caution, it's certainly true that if you're in a culture or in a family where calmness is valued, then people learn to calm down their reactions. So if you got a strong emotional reaction and you learn how to calm down quickly, that's something that's valuable in life, and it's valuable in meditation. But if by faking it you mean you're going to suppress your emotions and be in denial about your emotional reactions, pretending to be calm and actually deceiving yourself about your emotional reactions, then that kind of faking it might not be very much useful. So you got to practice mindfulness first and then fake it until you make it. Or else I could say you try to be calm, but at the same time, be mindful and with a really compassionate and open way, experience what you've got. So if your response is towards liking and disliking, see it very clearly with mindfulness and compassion, and then try to replace that with equanimity, and then that way you can act as if. It's also true that even this whole idea about why we study the suttas that teach us about meditations that we're not yet able to do, or study suttas that teach us about the noble qualities of an arahant that we don't yet possess. What's the use? So I don't recommend pretending to be an arahant. That would not be wholesome. But I do recommend taking the pattern of how a noble one responds to the world. And you may see in some small ways that similar responses are part of the repertoire that you have already. So just as the Buddha is not either elated or distressed by the different reactions of the students, you may find that to some extent also that you're not either elated or distressed by the reactions of the students when you give a lecture or give a teaching. And so if you say, well, this is, I must be on the right track, because in some small way, what I'm experiencing is within the same pattern as the pattern that's followed by the noble ones. When you practice virtue, and if you're not naturally virtuous and you have to use a lot of willpower and control yourself to restrain from doing bad deeds, you would know that a noble person has natural virtue, and they don't need to exercise all that willpower and be constantly trying to prevent themselves from doing bad deeds, because actually it's very difficult for a noble person to do a bad deed. So they would not, if they just do what comes naturally, then they will have the virtue that's a beloved quality of the noble ones. But even though you're an unenlightened person is using their willpower to try to be good, they're following, they're faking it until they make it, and acting like the way that a stream winner would act, acting in the way that a noble person would act, following the example that's set by the saints and by the Buddhas. Last question. This is regarding money. Would it be wise to strive to make money only to give it away to the Sangha before renouncing? Or should we just strive for liberation? My belief is that a person who is generous, who behaves in a way which is righteous and generous in their occupation or their livelihood, that it can happen that wealth may naturally come to them. Money can naturally come to them as a result of their of having, not having if someone has like a miserly, stingy attitude, that may create factors that are more conducive to poverty. But an attitude of generosity, sometimes together with doing the things that you're talented and skillful at in the worldly life. So I don't think that money is necessarily the goal, but I may be the wrong person to ask, because I never really was into that. So I suppose people who are like money managers and they know how to make money grow by wise investing and doing things with money. I suppose it's a the danger, and you're doing it in a way which is virtuous. So suppose even somebody who's like a big investor, they could be super virtuous, and they could be interested in making virtuous investments to support wholesome, good enterprises, to enable lots of people to be able to make a living, and for society to have enough of material things to provide the requisites of life for the whole world. And so that is an aspect of being a business person in a way which is wholesome and virtuous. And it's okay to do that. That's just a manifestation of virtue. But when that becomes too much of a burden on the mind, when it's holding you back, when you can't, your spiritual growth is being held back and stunted and harmed by your involvement in the world of business, then you should leave the world of business and go take up the renunciate life. Okay, this may be enough for now. I apologize for being so out of it this morning that I started this program late. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.